The protagonist offered the two men a chance at survival, conditional on them revealing the location of the demonic cult's hidden sanctuary inside Star City. He reasoned that in order to collaborate with Yi Chi from the martial artist base and assemble such a massive force in a short period, a significant number of cult members must have been secretly embedded within the city for a long time. Hearing this, the two immediately launched an assault against him. Channeling energy into his fist, Lin Chen roared at the protagonist not to boast, vowing to drag him down to hell even if it cost him his life. However, Baiyao intervened and urged a retreat. Baiyao then hurled an explosive into the air, creating a blinding flash of light, and within moments, the pair vanished completely. Once they were gone, the protagonist collapsed to the floor in relief, deeply grateful that they had finally fled. That previous maneuver had completely drained his thunder, fire, and metal 3 attribute spirit chi. Given that both opponents were tier 4 martial artists, he knew he couldn't guarantee a victory if they had fought to the death. Activating his healing technique once more, he focused on restoring his spirit chi as quickly as possible, determined to seek revenge on Yi Chi afterward. Meanwhile, Lin Chen and Baiyao were already fleeing in the distance. Lin Chen questioned why the young man hadn't pursued them, suspecting that the horrifying martial art had depleted the boy's spirit chi and wondering if it was all a bluff. Baiyao countered, asking what would happen if it wasn't a bluff, noting that such monstrous geniuses could never be measured by normal logic. Lin Chen angrily argued that no matter how monstrous the boy was, he was still just a tier 2, while the two of them were tier 4. Baiyao silenced him, reminding him how their entire group had been wiped out. The protagonist was only a tier 2, yet he managed to reduce 2 tier 4 martial artists into commanders without an army. If word got out, no one would ever believe it, as these monster geniuses were far worse than their predecessors. Frustrated and furious, Lin Chen fell silent. At the martial artist base, Yi Chi paced anxiously, wondering why there was no news. If the blockade continued, the city lord would surely find out soon. His face lit up when a small inscribed stone in his hand began to glow. However, the transmission delivered devastating news: the mission to eliminate the protagonist had failed. Stunned and frozen with fear, Yi Chi screamed in fury, asking if they were joking, unable to comprehend how they failed to kill a mere tier 2 martial artist. If the protagonist was still alive, their secret would undoubtedly be exposed. Panicked, he rushed out of his office while cursing repeatedly in his mind. He realized he needed to escape Star City undetected, or the city lord would show him no mercy. As he approached his vehicle, he bitterly blamed the protagonist for ruining everything and driving him to this desperation. Before he could step inside, he was abruptly paralyzed as a wall of flaming energy trapped him. From behind, a cold voice asked him exactly where he thought he was going. Hearing this, Yi Chi instantly gathered immense energy in his hand, his eyes flashing with intensity. He shattered the fiery cage, declaring to the protagonist that a mere tier 2 martial artist could never hope to kill him, a tier 3 peak martial artist. The protagonist offered no immediate reply. Instead, he prepared his offense, channeling his 3 elements directly into the spear gripped tightly in his hand. With a detached chill, he looked at Yi Chi and muttered that such an outcome was hard to guarantee. In a flash of violence, his spear thrust deeply into Yi Chi's torso, inflicting a devastating wound. Vomiting blood, Yi Chi cried out in horror, branding the protagonist a monster. The sheer force of the impact hurled Yi Chi backward, slamming him violently into his own vehicle before a massive explosion erupted, consuming both the car and his body in flames. With the battle concluded, the protagonist calmly walked away from the scene. Meanwhile, onlookers from the crowd quickly recognized the fallen man. Whispers spread that the victim was Yi Chi, the head of the martial artist base. Many found it hard to process how a tier 3 peak martial artist could be brought down so instantly by a single strike. Furthermore, they were stunned that anyone would dare execute a high-ranking Star City official in broad daylight. Before the protagonist could distance himself from the area, a fleet of black vehicles suddenly cut him off. The crowd gasped in shock as the city lord himself stepped out from one of the cars. Onlookers muttered among themselves, believing the city lord would never let the protagonist off after committing a murder out in the open. One citizen suggested they should act as witnesses to testify that Yi Chi had provoked the conflict by attempting to kill the young man first. Others agreed, declaring that a traitor like Yi Chi deserved his fate, and that they needed to stand by the protagonist now. However, the entire crowd was stunned when the city lord warmly addressed the protagonist as his dear boy, expressing immense relief over his safe return. He frantically asked if the young man had encountered any danger or sustained any injuries. Before the protagonist could even formulate a response, the city lord's gaze caught the 3-star patterned dark purple bamboo in his hand. Staring in utter disbelief that the boy had secured such a rare treasure, he remarked that the young man's fortune was truly extraordinary. Feeling a bit self-conscious, the protagonist simply replied that he was fortunate to have survived. Privately, he felt overwhelmed by how much the city lord doted on him, finding the intense affection hard to get used to. Shifting his attention to the burning wreckage, the city lord requested a detailed account of everything that had transpired. Over 10 minutes later, inside the quiet cabin of the black vehicle, the city lord sat in a stunned, speechless daze. Finding the sequence of events almost incomprehensible, he suggested they recap the facts to ensure he understood correctly. In essence, the demonic cult had conspired with Yi Chi, deploying 2 Tier 4 martial artists alongside 20 to 30 Tier 3 fighters to eliminate him. The protagonist had evaded them for 8 days, ultimately killing or severely wounding every single Tier 3 adversary, heavily crippling both Tier 4 martial artists, and walking away with the 3-star patterned dark purple bamboo. The protagonist nodded, confirming that was the sum of it. Overwhelmed with awe, the city lord leaned in close to the protagonist. He urgently asked if the young man would be willing to marry all 40 of his daughters, proposing that they needed to breed more monster geniuses like him to ensure the survival of the human race. Blushing and breaking into a nervous sweat, the protagonist backed away slightly, pleading with the city lord to stop joking. He then pointed out that the masterminds behind the demonic cult were likely still embedded somewhere inside Star City. The reminder brought the city lord back to reality, and he conceded that the protagonist was entirely correct. Even though the cult had failed this time, their next attempt on the boy's life would likely involve Tier 6 or even Tier 7 Grandmasters. He admitted that Star City lacked the resources to properly shield him, making it unsafe for him to remain. Fortunately, the college entrance exams were scheduled for the following month. He noted that if the protagonist could secure a spot at an elite institution like Magic City University or Imperial City University, even a Tier 7 Grandmaster sent by the cult wouldn't be able to touch him. With absolute certainty, the protagonist vowed that he would undoubtedly gain admission. Shortly after, the city lord dropped the protagonist off at his residence. Before taking his leave, he assured the young man that starting today, 2 separate details of martial artists would be assigned to patrol the neighborhood, ensuring he could focus on his cultivation with total peace of mind. The protagonist promptly expressed his gratitude to the city lord before stepping inside his home, where his anxious aunt and uncle immediately rushed to greet him. Spotting the injuries and the heavy stains on his clothes, they frantically asked if he was hurt, demanding to know why he was covered in so much blood and urging him to head straight to the hospital. The protagonist reassured them, explaining that all the blood belonged to ferocious beasts. He insisted he was perfectly fine and told them there was absolutely no need to worry. Shortly after, he retreated to his bedroom to rest. While winding down, he pulled up his status window to review his progress, noting that the intense battles in the bamboo forest had yielded roughly 3,100 martial value points. Dumping all of these points into his vitality would push that specific stat past the 1,000 point threshold, effectively elevating him to a Tier 3 martial artist. However, doing so would leave his spiritual power stagnant, which currently barely scraped the Tier 2 mark. Clenching his fist, he resolved that leaving the safety of the city was out of the question for now if he wanted to avoid another assassination attempt. Without a way to farm massive amounts of martial value outside, accelerating his spiritual growth would undoubtedly take time. Setting those worries aside for the moment, he decided to split his focus and upgrade both his spiritual power and vitality simultaneously. Once the attributes were allocated, he initiated his training session, causing the objects scattered around his room to immediately vibrate and float into the air. The following morning at Star City No. 1 High School, a student was vividly recounting the protagonist's recent exploit to a captivated crowd. He claimed that over 100 enemies had surrounded the protagonist, but with just a swift flick of his spear, the entire crowd was annihilated in the blink of an eye before anyone could even process what happened. The listeners cursed in sheer amazement, captivated by the protagonist's ruthlessness. Others shook their heads in disbelief, noting that the gap between a true genius and ordinary people was so vast they couldn't even compare themselves to a single strand of his hair. Their chatter was abruptly cut short when a voice boomed from the doorway, calling out for Chen Shan and Li Tu. The speaker angrily informed them that it was finally Class 7's turn for the touring seminar regarding the protagonist's achievements at the training camp. He demanded to know why they were wasting time over in Class 8, shouting that their actual peers had been waiting a whole week for them. Annoyed, Chen Shan and Li Tu shot back that they had already visited Class 7 the previous day, questioning their own memory. The speaker yelled back to clarify, explaining that they had visited the second-year Class 7 yesterday, whereas he was currently looking for the third-year Class 7. In the middle of their heated argument, a student stationed near the window suddenly shouted at the top of his lungs, announcing that the protagonist had just arrived on campus. Down below, the protagonist walked through the school gates, only to be startled by the thundering sound of rushing footsteps. Looking ahead, he saw an ocean of students charging toward him, their eyes completely bloodshot with intense excitement as they roared his name. They screamed for him not to run away, ecstatic that he had finally shown up for class. Breaking into a nervous sweat, the protagonist watched the approaching crowd with growing anxiety, utterly baffled as to why the entire student body seemed ready to mob him when he hadn't done anything to offend them.
The chapter ends here. Watch out for our upcoming uploads. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you'll always be updated on our future videos.